Hello everyone and welcome to today's performance assurance webinar. My name is Jenny and I'll be facilitating today's event. Today I'm joined by Anton, B and Daniel. And just before we get started, I just want to go through some housekeeping. So we ask that you keep your cameras and your microphones off. The event will be recorded and the slides and recording will be available on the REC portal. We'll also be using Slido. The QR code is on the screen now, and I think there's also a tab in the Teams chat that you can click on, and there will be opportunities for a Q&A throughout. So if you have any questions at any point, just pop it into Slido. So just wait on people to scan that QR code. And just while people are logging into Slido, I'll share the agenda for today. And I think we can jump right in. I'll hand over to Anton.
Hi, thanks very much. And thanks everyone for taking the time to come to our webinar. We're always trying to think about how these can be most useful for you. And as ever, we're thinking about the 4 questions you might ask us. What do I need to do? How is my reputation being protected? How is the REC improving things for me? And kind of, do I get the services I expect for the money I spend on the REC? So we've structured our presentation on those 4 key questions to help us focus on what you might be asking of us, instead of maybe so much the things that we want to tell you. So if we flick on to the next. So I'm just going to talk about the things that we're trying to do to try and improve switching, billing, REC related things. So if we skip on again, the first is engagement. This, I think, has been a bit of an evolution where we're doing more with you and thinking more about how to communicate with you. We did improve things, I think. The last webinar got really good feedback, but also some steers on how to further improve. We've got a lovely visual to try and show you the areas we think are focusing on. The first is the REC issues group. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to reuse existing fora wherever possible, and we think that's working really well to come there monthly for more day-to-day updates, as it were. We've bolstered our communication approach with REC parties with performance assurance check-ins. We did that as a trial and we think that's been very successful. We've got very good feedback, and that allows people a one-to-one, or maybe one organisation to performance assurance area for a discussion that's two-way, that can be about kind of what do I need to do, but it can also be about, what risks are developing, what problems might be occurring that performance assurance could be tackling, or other things that are relevant. And these webinars, we're focusing on making them more interactive and asking you more questions. Breakout rooms worked really well last time, but we will be thinking about how to make that a bit better. More transparency, so giving visibility of what we're doing in an easier to digest way. Tailored sessions, and communicating key messages. The code manager has focused on having key messages to get out there to help you guys see the most important things, I guess, see the wood from the trees, given that the code manager and Reco are very keen to communicate with you. That might at times become a bit much, but making sure that the key messages are heard through the right channels, including personal ones. In terms of tailored sessions and interactive webinars, if we just flick on, the kind of things that we were thinking about is having themed webinars. Actually, the breakout sessions got good feedback, but there was a really clear piece of feedback saying a lot of our stuff is focused on some groups, and sometimes other groups, important groups of organizations, feel like they need to kind of pick the relevant bits out. You don't want to sit on a long webinar to pick the relevant bits out. So our goal is to theme them, advertise those themes well in advance, and then have a clearer signposting. So, for example, we're proposing a deep dive into metering, so everyone understands or has the opportunity to understand what our strategy is, how far along that process we are and what the next steps are in both gas and electricity metering to drive performance improvements. That would contrast with doing a little bit of metering and a little bit of switching and a little bit of this in each of our webinars. This clearly is a proposal, and these webinars exist to give you the information that you need that's beneficial to you. So I think during the chat, I've just seen it, we'd like to see if you have things that you think should be, what's missing, what's more important, are there, it might be that everybody thinks an energy theft deep dive is the world's most important thing or the world's least important thing. Feedback from you will help us provide more useful sessions and essentially use your time better. So I think, Jenny, could I just clarify? Here we go. So we should give people a little bit of time because, getting on the QR code and thinking about these things. But if there are any other areas you'd like to hear from us, or if you have a strong preference, for example, energy theft needs to be in this month instead, or I think this one's not as significant, we're happy to hear from you.
So we've had a suggestion from Colin in the Q&A portion of Slido, suggesting that a data cleanse deep dive would be a good addition. And I can see that there are a couple people typing as well. So
Colin, that's a really good steer. Can't answer everything live, but we'll just think about the right timing there. And that data cleanse deep dive should be distinct from the things that we do in RIG, which tend to be every month. Maybe what's working, what's not, where are the challenges, what are we learning would more be the data cleanse deep dive. But Colin, brilliant idea.
I think you can see that on the screen. I'm very pleased to see a different approach and agree with the order.
Yeah, no, I just want to say I agree there, Claire, that I think there's a difference, isn't there, between saying this is only for MEMS and this is a topic on metering. And I think we were trying for the latter, so I apologise if I haven't communicated that too strongly. You're right, improvements in metering support would be delivered through a range of parties, but they would also support a range of parties. So I think that is quite important. And our goal here isn't necessarily, although there might be one day where we're like, this is the party group, it's a session for you guys. The idea is to do this by topics. I don't think we would ever exclude people from coming. I don't think there'd ever be a reason why you can't come. But of course, different parties have different focuses. I feel like I should wait for the one more participant.
No pressure, one more participant. I can also leave the poll open for a bit longer if people, if anything springs to mind as the presentation goes on. And naturally, there are no right or wrong answers. I don't know if that hinders people from replying, the fact that your name is on there, but it's just so we know kind of who wants what.
So I really like it was one new participant, I think, Jennifer. I really like this suggestion. This is a suggestion that I honestly wouldn't have thought of myself. So what a cracking, that's the reason, isn't it, to engage. So I think this is really a really clear suggestion, and perhaps we should broaden it. These are things that are coming down the track, but perhaps what we should do is when there are significant changes to the park that impact market participants, maybe less so organisations like DCC or Exaserve or organisations like that a run through of the changes and maybe a drop-in session would really help people. Again, always making sure I don't say something too silly. We should reflect on what the appropriate timing is for that. We don't want to do it the day before it is due. That is unhelpful. And we don't want to do it when when you're just looking at it the first time. We will reflect on that. If anyone has a strong steer on that, please just reach out and let us know, because as I said, we're doing this to try and make it easier for you. We do our best to understand you, but you already understand you, so please tell us. But I think that probably has been a useful session. If we move on to the next bit. So when we think about the purpose of performance assurance, this is twofold. There really is a purpose on making sure that the market works for those who are in it and those who will be applying to be in it. That is a really key piece of value that we think about. It's also really important that we're doing the right things for consumers. That really is important too. So we have been doing many things to drive both those types of value. But I wanted to call out some of the key ones. The first one is energy theft. This is more of a joint achievement, I would say. Certainly suppliers and others have put a lot of time and effort into energy theft, and we can see that coming through into the numbers. In 23-24, there's been a significant improvement in theft performance. So we've seen 40% more theft investigations reported to us, although we should acknowledge that the reporting has now become mandatory. So that will be a factor. But 28% more confirmed thefts. You've always needed to confirm your thefts through the theft detection incentive scheme. So it looks like that is a real thing and not like a change of the rules. 5 more suppliers are actively engaging in confirming thefts, which actually I think is the most important thing here. Energy theft is a bit unpredictable in how much you're going to find and where, because theft is part of it. People are trying to hide this. So active and proper engagement is really the key thing that we need to drive up. This benefits all parties. It really benefits consumers and people who aren't the direct consumer at that meter. It makes it safer for everybody. So this is a really important area of focus. And I think I think a joint achievement between the code manager and the parties. There are some others that I wanted just to make sure that you're aware of. We obviously keep some of our work confidential from other organisations, particularly before any specific work has concluded, because often that specific work is validating to see if there really is a problem here. So we do that. But I thought it was important that you know, because you might not be receiving queries or inquiries or PATs, but I think it's helpful to know that there's someone out there looking out for this market. So the first one is switching. Actually, only 2% of parties are over threshold this quarter. But that is a small number, isn't it? The main focus on these organisations over threshold relate to objections, particularly in the non-domestic sector. Our interventions are focused on outliers. What we're really focused here on is to make sure that valid switches can occur. This benefits everyone. It benefits consumers and it benefits other suppliers by having a level playing field. Oh, there is a question. I'll just finish this thought and then I'll come to you, Colin. We are looking into domestic objection outliers too. That is relevant. But actually our key focus here is to make sure valid switches can progress. Colin, you put your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Anton. Just going back to something you said about energy theft reporting there.
Yeah.
You mentioned the reporting had become mandatory. Could you just explain a bit more what you meant by that? Because
sure.
Because on the dashboard reporting, the 1340 and 1341 files are described as conditional. Was that what you were referring to? I'm just wondering what that change was you're referring to.
So I think I can try and be clearer, and you can tell me if I've not been. So I think you need to submit a file when a thing happens, but you will not always have a thing, if that makes sense. Particularly different scales of supplier. Probably the largest suppliers have something to submit every month, but there are probably smaller suppliers who might only have something that's kind of reportable, as it were, 1 month or 2 months, because they operate at a smaller scale. So I think that's the conditional we are talking about. Organisations have always had to report thefts that they confirm, and then that goes into an incentive regime, a financial incentive called TDIS. That's always been the case. And in that file, there has also been an idea of investigations. And those investigations are obviously checking in on stuff, but you haven't got all the way to the evidence basis of the confirmed. And we would think there's a funnel, right? There are more investigations than confirmed. Previously, you didn't have to submit details of all of the investigations. But I think for this year, so probably this was an 18 months ago change, people have to tell us about the investigations. And part of the benefit of this is that we understand better, kind of how that funnel works, and can think about incentives better. So, for example, we think people put a lot of work into investigations, and that there should be an element of reward there. And we're looking at a change. This hasn't gone live. This is still in the consulting with industry stage, where investigations get some reward to help you be a bit more predictable, to help you convince your finance director you should be working on theft.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that clear?
It does make sense. I think it's just that subtlety of conditionality upon confirmed versus conditionality on investigations. So no, I understand what you're saying. Thanks for that.
Thanks, Colin. So if we flick on to the next slide, and by the way, I like talking to people, so do it as Colin did. Address updates. So we monitor flows that are involved in address updates, and DCC do some related but different work on rel address. 5% of parties are over the threshold this quarter, mainly IDNOs who are slow to process MPL updates. When thinking about how to intervene, we're always conscious of what's going on, like the context. In this, we're conscious that there's a lot going on for DNOs at the moment. This might be part of a spike of updates to get ready for MHHS, which is a good thing, right? So we're engaging with the IDNOs to work with them to address these issues, but getting the right address at the start makes it easier and less likely that a consumer later will have a problem. But also it means with switching, a different supplier might end up taking this on, or, obviously they always stay with the same DNO. It might mean somebody else has to go and fix it. So we're quite keen that it gets sorted first time, and there's not that kind of demand for changes and updates later down the line, which is harder. So we're doing this to think about the people in future and the consumers. The next one's an odd little one. It's called data quality issues. These are people who struggle to submit valid messages into CSS. This might seem minor to you, but to me, it seems like as an assurance professional, it seems like an early warning indicator. So there are 2 specific suppliers we're working with there who are submitting invalid requests and actually reliably submitting data as part of like the basics of doing your job, and not submitting things at the right time in objection windows or with the wrong data. That can cause problems. That can cause erroneous switches, which is a problem. So we are working with these organisations to make sure they can meet those basic standards. There's a few miscellaneous things I just wanted to cover. Moving on. We're in the later stages of concluding an investigation into a single party with identified switch blocking issues. This in net benefits all suppliers and helps to build that improvement in the brand of our industry. we need to have a level playing field. Valid switches need to progress. We're investigating 2 more suppliers based on allegations of sales practice that result in erroneous switches and switch blocking. Clearly, we need to finish those investigations, but making sure these things are prevented, like that really benefits a lot of organisations. And we're seeing significant improvements in data quality from Data Cleanse Sprint 2. So 25,000 energised no MPAN incidents have been resolved. This is significant, and there's significant progress on invalid map IDs. We're really pleased to see that industry is engaging with this properly and getting through these and cleansing this information. That's a really good piece of value that we've jointly delivered. Due to the nature of some of these things, we can't give a blow-by-blow commentary. It's really important that we get the right facts and get to the right outcome. And that, of course, might be that these organisations were following the right rules, and that would be appropriate, wouldn't it? I think the key thing that I'm trying to tell you is that our interventions are more targeted than they were when we started this, what was 2 or 3 years ago. They're more focused on market and consumer benefit, and actually they're less, they're less specific requests, or less requests for you to engage unless there's a problem. I just wanted to move on to talk a little bit about metering, I think is the next slide. So gas metering is one more thing that's happening at the moment. Gas MAMs every year need to provide Exaserve some data, and we recently got the outputs of that exercise. This has again identified a high error rate on reconciled fields, and I think we do need to intervene to drive up performance. I think that's quite important. It's notable that some gas MAMs did not submit, and I think something like this is quite important. So we will be working with those organisations to understand why they didn't, to make sure that they can submit the data so that they can be on the same standing as those who did meet their requirements, and to make sure that anyone who continues to non-submit goes through the appropriate escalation at the PAB. For those issues that have been identified, we do need to cleanse this data, and we propose that the most successful method that we've found has been data cleanse sprints. We think that this is a shared responsibility between MAMs and suppliers, and that I think they need to work together to resolve these data discrepancies. So that will be a key focus on driving up that meter technical detail quality. Fixing these issues has like a lot of benefits across the industry. I know data quality does sound a little dry, or probably don't tell those stories to those of what the most exciting things have ever happened in your job, but it does improve settlement, it improves billing, it avoids parties inheriting problems that they need distant operatives out to go and address. It supports a range of different things. I think Claire's got a hand up.
Hi, Anton. Yes, thank you very much. So on this topic, you've listed in the bullet point there that you'll be including this in the next data cleanse sprint for suppliers and MAMs. But can I ask, as a MAM, if you did have any concerns with our submission, would we already have heard something about that?
No. So I think,
okay.
I think, Claire, if you have submitted and we have seen an output from Exaserve, that kind of third bullet down, that wouldn't apply to you. I think that third bullet down for missing information, that will be something that will be shortly communicated. I've just been updated from one of my colleagues. Fee, do you want to just cover the point that?
Yeah, of course. So Claire, I believe Exaserve do share the output of discrepancies with parties after they've run the analysis. So we get the output for the whole industry, but individual parties will get the output of what the data that they submitted that's been checked. So if that's not the case, please do let me know, because then because my understanding is that's the process.
So that should have already happened. So your process isn't replacing the Exaserve process, it's something in addition to it.
Yes.
That's fine. Thank you for clarifying that, Fee.
That's fine.
Thank you.
So that might be a natural segue. I was about to finish and hand over to V. So I guess it is a natural point to pause. If anyone has any further questions, we're happy to discuss them. And I think there's also a space for Q&A at the end. Well, then I should probably, without further ado. Oh, actually, he says that, then it is him again. Sorry, my mistake. Okay, well, let's keep going. if we move on. So a couple of important things that we are doing that you should be aware of in the next quarter is the annual review of the theft target methodology. Energy theft, as we've said, super important. We want to make sure that we get the right input from parties or other interested organisations, but particularly parties, to make sure this is as effective as it can be. We'll start by issuing an options paper or call for evidence in September. I think it's quite important. That's a call for evidence, you know, not an RFI, but I do appreciate a lot of you spend a lot of time answering lots of people's requests. This is really to get the right input from parties to get evidence that we can get the right values in the TTM. This defines 4 bits of the theft scheme: the incentive pot, the theft detection value, theft targets, and the allocation methodology, which I think are all important to organisations subject to the theft detection incentive scheme. So we're also progressing some changes, and there's I073, which we'll be doing in parallel to further improve this scheme. If you're really interested in theft, there is a theft issues group that's progressing many of these issues. It's worth getting involved. It's worth having your say, and it's worth helping us do this better. But I just wanted to call out that we really would benefit from your input into the call for evidence and your steers to make sure we make the best decisions that we possibly can with the best information. Just moving on. The other thing that we'll be thinking of, we're just about to close out Data Cleanse Sprint 2, which has been effective, and we'll be thinking about Data Cleanse Sprint 3. We often communicate our data cleanse activity through the REC issues group, but I wanted everyone here to know as well. So from October, there will be reporting on the REC portal on the specific data items. We'll be focusing on the following reports. One is the new MTD items related for MHHS. So that's important for suppliers in particular. And the key motivation here is that we're all getting ready for MHHS, and the REC is playing the right role. In terms of the next line, it's invalid top lines. So suppliers and DNOs, this is relevant for. There's a higher volume of reports. This has been a report that kind of has been in a watching brief for a while. We think it's now time to start cleansing it actively. And the last one we talked about, those CDSP reconciliation, which is for MAMs and suppliers. So data cleanse guidance and targets will be available to help you work out what you need to do. There will be opportunities to ask questions. RIG is the classic place for that. And we'll share progress each month. We also encourage organisations to share good practice. If they've been struggling and found a better way of doing things, let's all do this. Let's cleanse this as an industry. As we broaden our approach to this beyond mostly suppliers in the past, frankly, we need to consider if all of our right incentives are lined up. So in our next annual rating, we'll think about making sure that there's a rating for all of the right organisations to drive incentives on top of the usual performance assurance techniques to make sure these items are cleansed at an appropriate speed, and that, of course, that appropriate speed has been subject to engagement with the industry. Is there any questions on those 2 bits? I am now a bit worried because I think I have to hand over to V and hope I'm not getting it wrong again.
You've got this right this time. Thanks, Anton. Hi, all. For those of you who do not know me, I am V Sharma. I'm part of the performance assurance team. And today I'll be covering 2 sections of the webinar with you. First of which is taking you through things that you need to be aware of where your input will be sought. Of course, this is in addition to some of the things Anton's spoken about, but we'll summarize that in a second. I wanted to start with the first thing. So the performance assurance framework, which we quite often refer to as the PAF. Every year we review it, and that review process has kicked off. So I'm going to take you through that process and also tell you about a few checkpoints that you should make note of where your input would be requested. So if we move to the next slide, please, Jenny, thank you. So we have just, as of last month, got our performance assurance operating plan for the year that started on 1st September 2024, approved by PAB. Whilst this document was in development, we used the last webinar to seek input from yourselves. We also used the different fora, such as the REC issues group, to gain feedback and also to give you progress updates as the thinking on the performance assurance operating plan developed. And now this document's currently published, and you would have seen an update in the change bulletin last week, sharing this information. One of the first activities in the performance assurance operating plan is to review the retail risk register to make sure that the view of retail risks is current, and we're looking and focusing on the key things that are identified there. So one of the first activities we are conducting this month is review of that document. And at the end of the month, that document will go for review to PAB with the updates that we propose. And once that's semi-signed off by the PAB, we'll be issuing a Category 3 consultation where we'll seek your input on the view that we've put forward. Now, of course, the risk register itself contains the view of the retail risks. We are changing how the look and feel of it slightly this year. We are going to basically provide a mapping on the activities that we're doing, how they link, and how those initiatives will help cover the risks and drive improvement in those areas. So that joint consultation is something that is expected to land towards the end of September, and will run over the end of September, first 2 weeks of October. So I would just recommend everyone make note of that, please. Once we've been through that process and we've got a current view of retail risks, we'll then assess, do we need any additional reporting items to monitor those risks and to measure them. So, but naturally, the next activity that comes onto our PAF review will be the Performance Assurance Reporting Catalog, or the PARC. We'll be reviewing that with the retail risk view in mind. This activity is planned for October 2024. So again, another one to look out for. The one other thing I actually wanted to flag here is that the PARC is also impacted by various other rec change issues and rec change proposals that are currently underway. So you may see extracts of the PARC being consulted on as part of other change solutions. This review that I'm referring to here, that's planned for October, will be more of an overall looking at all the data items that are there. Are they still current, and is there anything new required? That would be a separate change. One other change actually over there I'd like to call out is R202, which should be shortly coming up for party impact assessment, if it's not already there. So that one is looking at the MHHS impacts on the PARC. So it's basically outlining all the new reporting we would need to monitor processes introduced by or changed by MHHS program. So with that, that's a summary of the view of the PAF review that will be taking place in the next few months or so, next quarter, and the point at which you should, we will ask for your input, so things for you to keep in mind. With that said, I know Anton's talked about a few things, and as have I wanted to take this opportunity to move to the next section where we're trialing out something, and I'll ask for your views on this in a second. So Jenny, if you show the checklist, so we've basically bought all that information that we've given you so far, and then some of it which on the service provider side that I'll talk about in a second. We've summarized that into a little table that will help parties by the role that they perform in the industry, track what key areas their inputs required in and what they need to be doing. So in this view that you've got in front of you right now, we've summarized the things that we've spoken about that the focus in the next quarter will be, and where the various party roles are involved. So the first one, monthly data submission. This is something suppliers, DNOs, and service providers, they submit data to us, the POC items, on a monthly basis that then go into our performance risk monitoring and the performance assurance dashboard development activities. So again, those parties should ensure that they're on track to submit those on time and have submitted those on time. The next activity is the performance assurance dashboards. They're published every month on the PAB paper day, which is the penultimate Tuesday of the month. So PAB meet on the last Tuesday of the month, and a week before that is or 5 working days before that is the paper day. That's when the performance assurance dashboards are released as well. So again, an encouragement, like I would like to encourage parties to review those on a monthly basis, see how they're performing, any trends in their performance, so that they have the ability to proactively respond to any issues before they breach a threshold and PAB interventions start applying. So for DNOs, suppliers, and also service providers, that's an activity to keep in mind on a monthly basis. Then again, actions that will come out of our data review, especially quarterly PAT, any notifications, etc. Suppliers, MEMS, DNOs, and GTs should keep track of those and ensure that they're actioning those on time. If you require any further discussions with us on those or any clarifications, please reach out to us as soon as you receive those and have had a chance to look at those. The other key activity that's going to be happening in the month of September is the annual rating. So I know you all, so the annual rating currently published for suppliers and DNOs. So in the month of July, we released the draft scores, and I appreciate we've had calls with some parties and received some feedback on the draft rating. And those will now be finalized and be published in line with the plan that we had previously communicated as a peer comparison in the month of September. So that's another one to keep an eye out for. Anton spoken about the Sprint 2 Data Cleanse Sprint 2 close, as well as the Data Cleanse Sprint 2 prep. So again, further communications will come on those. We'll be using the REC issues group to do a deeper dive with parties this month. So something to look out for. That's relevant to suppliers, MEMS, and DNOs. Then Anton spoke about the theft target methodology, and I spoke about the PAF, the performance assurance framework. So there are some consultations, some call for evidence coming out shortly. So please keep a lookout on the various REC bulletins for this and direct comms that we may plan. So you're able to feed into those. In terms of MHHS readiness, we had, I think at the last webinar, we talked you through the activity we'll be conducting, and also we'd gone into the deep dive at the MHHS focused webinar RECO had organized in July. So we are working with electricity suppliers and meter operators to ensure that that all suppliers and meter operators have done what they need to in terms of DTN changes, supply number changes, and the new processes around change of supplier with migration around MTD sending, etc., and the conversion of MTDs, that they are on track to deliver those changes. So we'll be conducting that activity in the quarter. So if you're an electricity supplier on MEM, you will hear from us. So something to have on your radar. And then I'll go into the next bit in a bit more detail in the next section, but that's relevant to service providers, where we do deep dives and report directly to PAB on their performance. Other than these activities that we've got here on the screen, there's also the maintenance of qualification deadlines, which are sort of staggered through the year. So depending, like from party to parties, that and specific performance assurance techniques that are applied, that may vary slightly. So those are our other two things to sort of keep on your radar through the year. So I've given a flavor of what we are working with, and we've sort of pulled this through for the next quarter. I would like to ask you all a question, whether something like this would be useful to share, especially like something, if we could publish something like this on a monthly basis, would parties find that useful to track activities or actions and inputs that they need to provide, especially for performance assurance? Jenny's posted the Slido links if people want to use that to vote. And again, if there's any feedback on how we can make it more useful for you, please feel free to raise your hand, give any feedback, or I'm happy for you to reach out to us separately as well, offline. So we've had 5 responses. Again, Jenny, is it possible for us to leave this one open for people to come back on?
It will close for a moment, but I can leave it open.
Brilliant.
So yeah, just ignore the notification that will come up that it's closed. I'll reopen it.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. So in that case, we can move on. So yeah, so the next update I wanted to provide, it's specific for suppliers, as it's relevant to suppliers, and it's related to the erroneous switch, the risk monitoring that we do on erroneous switches. So if we move to the next slide, please. So since earlier in the year, around April time, we've been working with some parties who had brought to our attention that they had suspected some issues with how the data that they were seeing in the dashboards, and they'd raised queries around certain instances that they were noting there. So since then, we've been working with those parties as well as DCC, who are the central source where the data for these areas that comes from. And we've basically identified that for the 2 risk drivers, one which looks at the volume of erroneous switches by party, and the other one which looks at the timeliness of resolution of erroneous switch once it's initiated, that the data for those 2 is correct. And before we resume reporting on these risk drivers, we basically wanted to give you all a heads up. So you have the opportunity to look at the dashboards before we start applying any performance assurance techniques or any other interventions. One point to clarify here is that the data on these 2 risk drivers, it does not look at the initial switch event, but it looks that reporting is based on the remedial switch event. So that, wanted to clarify that. And yeah, as I mentioned, we won't be applying any patch just yet. We will notify you if you're breaching threshold, but we'll basically the next what do you call it, the active patch month that is expected for November. That's when you should, I mean, you'd hear from us if if you're continuously breaching threshold. So yeah, we wanted to make sure that we notify you of your performance, and that you have the opportunity to self-correct before any additional interventions are applied, and that's why we've taken this decision. If you do have any questions, so the data will actually be live in the dashboards from 17th September. Once you've had a chance to look at it, if you still have any queries, need any clarifications, do reach out to us through inquiries, and we'd be happy to support. Brilliant. I think that was everything. Colin, you've got a question.
It's more a suggestion, really.
Yeah.
Just with the performance data. I mean, this is really useful to know, because I've been wondering what had happened to 12.1 and 12.6, because we do look at these every month, and I wonder whether it would be good to have a stable table, if you know what I mean. So that if something drops out or it's not being produced for any reason, that's stated.
Okay.
in the risk driver table that's produced, so that we're always looking at the same set of numbers, because from a really practical point of view, we sort of download these and transpose them into other spreadsheets that we use to, present things to exec and stuff like that. So if it's consistent, it's a lot easier to do that every month. And also there's quite a few of the categories where they just return zeros every month. And are they real zeros, or are they because those categories aren't reported on? Isn't always clear either.
Okay.
So it's just something maybe to think about, whether there's a notes field or something like that could be put in that table, so that it's clear to a party, well, yeah, 12.1 still exists as a measure, but there's a problem with it at the moment. That's why we're not seeing it. Otherwise, you might think, well, actually, it's 12.1 not a thing anymore, and it hasn't been very easy to tell that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a brilliant suggestion. And I think we do have the release pane that the team used for some of this information. I think we just need to make sure that it's clearly signposted and parties are aware of those changes. So you'll definitely hear a lot more, like from various different channels, on this is missing and this will be back on this date, or things like that. I don't know, Anton, if you wanted to jump in there.
Well, you said the things that I was intending. The release pane is exactly intended for that, but clearly it's not got the perfect UI UX there. So we definitely should listen, right? Colin, your suggestion was a good one.
Brilliant.
Thanks both.
Thank you. With that, I think we're at the end of this section. So Jenny, if you move to the next section, we'll be looking a bit more into what we've been doing along with the rec service providers, and also our plan for the next quarter. So the next slide, please. The first section we're going to actually look at a look back at the quarter that's just completed. And on the next slide, we've got firstly, a bit of an overview for anyone who's not familiar with our service provider assurance. We assure the services that are provided by two main service provider, Reco being the first, who provide the inquiry services, the code manager services, as well as the metering auditor service, and also DCC, who provide the central registration service, or CSS, CSS certificate authority, and switching operator. Now, PAB interventions in the last quarter, and usually they fall under two categories. First of which is a bit more reactive. So through our risk monitoring, where we identify performance issues, we apply techniques and interventions to manage those and tackle those. And the other ones are a bit more proactive, so identifying areas where we can drive improvement and proceeding with those. So we've summarized, I'll take you through these quickly in a second. So we've summarized certain things that we've done in the last quarter, falling in the two buckets. Firstly, we've tackled performance issues. So we noted a few instances of GES and GRDS outages. We've worked with the service provider to understand what caused it, what kinds of impacts that would have had, and address that accordingly, and like ensuring there's provisions in place to prevent impact in future. Another area that we've looked at is for some technical changes. We've noted that a few technical changes have been delayed. So we've done a deeper dive to understand what's caused that, and have action plans in place to ensure lessons are taken from those, and also these kinds of delays are prevented in future. One of the things that we do on a quarterly basis is the centralized registration service, the CRS performance charge, which is applied on DCC to incentivize better performance from the CSS, CSSA, and switching operator services. So again, that's something this quarter we've got the maximum margins that can be applied approved by PAB. We are also monitoring RECO and DCC's progress against the actions that came out of the major switching incident review from last year, and challenging them to ensure that those are met and the benefits they set out to deliver are delivered. We also do a deep dive in various performances, various service performance. So this quarter, we've looked at the technical service provided by the code manager, how that's performing, and that's been a direct update to PAB around on how that's working. And other than that, we've also noted some performance issues with the electricity inquiry service and the SDEP, and again, we focused on understanding the root cause and working on ways to prevent it in future, and making sure that the impacts are minimized. Another area is the code manager's performance. So we do review code manager's performance on a monthly basis, and we do some additional assurance techniques on a quarterly basis. And RECO have also attended PAB in the last quarter to provide a direct sort of overview to PAB on the status of the service and also the initiatives that they're doing to improve performance for both the code manager or for all the code manager services and the metering auditor service. And finally, DCC, they have been in the past year quarterly presenting an update to PAB on the status of the address management work that they do and of the switching service. Those, again, this quarter DCC has presented, and yeah, that's something I'll speak on how these will evolve in the next quarter in a second. But in terms of driving improvements initiatives, so one of the things that we've been considering is reviewing the change process. So one of the other deep dives that has just taken place in the last month with PAB is looking at how well the change process is working. And this has reflected in areas such as engagement with the change process, the timeliness of progressing changes, and also the benefits that changes are reviewing. So that's something that PAB's directly been looking into. Another area has been is reviewing the REC data access matrix and changes to it. So over the last quarter, any new types of users and what kind of access they should have, decisions like those have come to PAB. We've also checked DCC's progress against the work-off plan that came from CSS Go Live, and that's all been completed. So we've made sure that's all ticked off. Jennifer, you'd made a suggestion earlier today around having more of more visibility on the REC changes that are being looked at and assurance decisions relating to those. So that's something we've been actively, like PAB, are getting more involved in specific changes that would require assurance, and we're ensuring that assurance decisions form part of the solution development and they're not retrofitted later. So again, we've looked at the TPI Code of Conduct change, which is R137, and the change of occupier change, which is the process that's being introduced under R155. We've also been feeding in directly into the development of the TPI Code of Conduct, working with the wider code manager team as well as RECO. And we're also working on shaping the future of the DCC performance charge that we've mentioned. I'll touch a bit more in detail on that one in a second, but that's basically a summary of all that's been going on in this last quarter. I don't know if there's any questions. I will move to the next bit where we're going to do a bit more of a forward look, what our focus in the next quarter is going to be, and take you through some of the key initiatives we are planning. Jenny, if we move to the next slide, please. Brilliant, thank you. So the main purpose of these initiatives that we've planned, it's to incentivize better performance and across the various rec services. So one of the first things that we're going to be looking at is we'll be reviewing the key performance indicators that we currently measure performance against, whether those are relevant, whether something else would be more useful. So that review will be taking place. So over the year, every quarter, we'll pick a service and focus on that service. For the next quarter, we will be starting with the electricity registration data service provided by the DNOs. And we will obviously, like, there are downstream impacts that might impact other parties. So we'll be hosting some workshops where wider rec stakeholders will have the ability to input into that analysis, and we'll be asking you for input both through the workshops as well as offline. Appreciate not everyone can always attend these sessions, and there's lots of other asks in the industry, but that's one of the first things that we're going to be looking at. So things for all of you to note on this is we'll ask for your input. We'll also summarize what came out of that process. And if there's any changes that are proposed, that'll go through the rec change process, and the proper consultation will take part, will be part of it over there. Another initiative that I just briefly touched upon is the switching incentive regime. So the performance charge on the centralized registration service provider. That's applied since 1st April 2023. So an entire year of that performance charge being applied has taken place. We have seen some improvements in the service. However, we feel those have been slightly slow, despite having applied the maximum allowed performance charge in each of the quarters. So we are working on looking at how we can improve that incentive regime and basically ensure that we focus on the right areas, the areas that have the most impact, most downstream impact, to make it more effective. So that will again come through the rec change process, and one to keep an eye on, and we'll ensure that we're consulting with all of you to and getting your feedback as that's developed. If we move to the next one, another few examples we've got. So we've got some deep dives that we've been conducting. Firstly, the service provider deep dive. So I'd mentioned earlier in the last quarter, we've looked at the technical service, and we've also looked at change. This basically is, and there's more detail on our performance assurance operating plan on how these are spread through the year. But we'll be looking at the CSS particularly in this coming quarter, how they're performing, so trends in performance, things that are working well, things that need improvement, and initiatives that are planned to make those improvements. It's like a mini performance review in essence. All the papers that come on these service provider deep dives, they are public papers. They're issued through the PAB portal. So I would encourage all of you to have a look at those, and specific actions that come out. We'll use forum like these, and also the benefits that deliver through the tracking of those actions. We'll use these to share those insights with yourselves. Another area of deep dives is our on changes, like specific changes that are coming through. PAB's interested in identifying key changes where assurance need to be thought about. And as I mentioned, that we've already been doing this for the quarter. It's also to see one part is during the change life cycle, we feed into the right time to ensure the solution looks at assurance. But then there's also the post-change review that we'll be doing to see that the changes actually deliver the benefits that they had set out to deliver, how effective they've been, etc. So for both those kinds of things, there'll be specific papers going to PAB, and wherever there's assurance decisions being made, we'll ensure that we offer PAB a range of options so that they can choose the most proportionate of those options to apply. So all of these papers would again be as part of the PAB papers. They're published. We try to keep as many things as public as possible. So parties have the transparency point, the people have visibility of what information is being used to make decisions and what decisions are coming out. Any further changes and also like the assurance decisions would then form part of the change solution, which would then get consulted on as part of the change process as well. So you'll have the opportunity to review those there. That said, next couple of things that I wanted to mention on the next slide would be the market schemes. So we're now looking at developing a assurance framework to review the effectiveness of market schemes. TDIS, market stabilization charge, MSC, and prepayment levelization or payment method levelization. Those are recently delivered schemes. We've had lots of feedback on what's working well, what's not working so well. So we have decided to propose through this year a new initiative where we do a formal assurance review of schemes that are delivered to identify lessons for future, as well as any areas of improvement that can help make these schemes more effective. These would, again, you can look at the performance assurance operating plan to see when certain things are planned for. They'd be presented to PAB in public papers, which parties can access and read and gain insights on. And another area, and I think this is quite an important one, as this came out of the feedback we received from yourselves at the June webinar when we were working on the PAYOP. There is lots of change happening across the industry. And I think that's when change is happening, that magnitude of transformation that's happening, there's impacts that can happen on parties, risk associated with that needs to be taken into account. So with that in mind, there is activity that PAB will be conducting. So we'll be asking RECO to keep PAB updated on the impacts of the various changes and the transformation activity that are happening, how they're considering impacts on parties and how they're mitigating those and ensuring that the right support is available to parties to make these change programs successful. Also understanding where these overlaps are happening and where the pinch points may be, and if anything needs to be adjusted to make sure it's most effective, those kinds of decisions are taking place. So all of those PAB papers, like the plan for when they'll come is in the performance assurance operating plan. They'll be available on the PAB paper, and for transparency, we'll try and make as much information publicly available as possible. So that's what we've got planned for the next quarter. There's lots and lots happening. And when we come and present our REC services deep dive, we'll try and summarize insights from these and like the benefits delivered during that session. I think that's the last of what we had to share with yourselves. I don't know, Jenny, if we've got any questions or if anyone wants to raise their hand and ask any questions.
Thank you, V. As far as I can see, there are no questions on Slido at the moment. Like V said, you can type it into Slido if you do have a question, or you can just pop your hand up and yeah, we can answer your questions here. In the meantime, I will open the feedback poll just to let us know what you liked about the webinar, what we can improve. Your feedback is very, very valuable to us and helps us optimize these events. So as far as I can see, there are no questions at the minute. I think maybe we can perhaps call it early and
yeah, we should call it early, but just to be really clear, if you did have a question and you didn't want to say it in this forum, there's always ways to talk to us. Or if who knows, if you're making a sandwich in a minute and you're like, oh, I really wish I'd asked, please do reach out. It does help, and I really want to thank those. We don't all have to engage, do we? That's not what the world's like. But those that did ask us questions, give us steers, I really appreciated it. It is being listened to, and it does help us do this better.
That's right. Thank you very much, Anton. And yeah, thank you, everyone. Oh,
I think Paul
has raised his hand.
As I'm sure you know, I really hate silence. So I found this. I don't usually get the chance to dial in. I've been interested in this from two perspectives. One of which is as a member of the PAB, as you know, and so I think it's really useful. I found this to be a really useful overview and update. Hopefully, people did as well. I guess that's why I see the thumbs. People don't necessarily always want to co-sign and say it, but I think it is useful. And yeah, to get that kind of feedback, I think we as the PAB and you guys in the team want that feedback on how these things are being done and looking to evolve that. And if people, as a supplier rep, if people want to contact me as well with any concerns they have around or questions or anything around performance assurance, I'd encourage that as well. But I think it's what you talked about earlier, I think looking at specific areas like metering and those kind of things in these future sessions, I think it's going to be really useful to focus on some of those areas and discuss them in more detail. But I certainly found this as a useful overview of kind of what's being planned and what's been taken forward. And thank you and the team for going through with us. It's really useful.
Thanks, Paul.
And Jennifer's raised her hand as well.
Thanks. I'll try not to keep everybody. Just a quick question. We've been having sort of bilateral meetings with Ofgem recently about the work they're doing on their sort of data requirements and potentially new RFIs in the non-domestic sector that they're looking to introduce next year. One of the things that we've sort of suggested to them is to speak to you guys about the parser, because you could be asking for the same thing twice, which is a real bugbear for suppliers, where we have to submit requests for information to multiple different parties. So it was just a case of, is there that intention to work with Ofgem around the sort of work they're doing on the data requirements at the moment, so we don't have to do everything twice?
Yeah, look. So I probably the world is where it is, and probably if we started with privatization again, things would have turned out differently, and these structures would be different, wouldn't they? I think it is something that we hear a lot, not specifically the one that you've just said there, but the general thing that we hear a lot is there's a lot going on in this industry, and oh my, and that might even pick up with a new government. And it's really hard if you're in a regulatory team, keeping on top of it, particularly if it all seems to land at once. We hear those things. So from a performance assurance perspective, we've tried to use a significant reduction in information requests. We also do our best to work with Ofgem on coordinating. Perhaps I shouldn't say it like this, but there is a bit of a hierarchy, and Ofgem probably are a bit higher up in the hierarchy than we are. So we share all of our activities planned. Obviously, we don't say that V's going to send an email at 3:17, but we share our plans. We ask them for their input, and they have a standing invite to the REC PAB. RECO also have a relationship. That isn't one, I'm involved in a bit of that where it pertains to energy theft, because that overlaps with my role, but I don't see it all. Obviously, I don't need to see it all. We're also there doing the same thing, and we are doing our best to deliver our scope as best as we can and coordinate. If you could help me a little bit here, Jennifer, with a few, perhaps you could email us after with a few specifics. I think we've got a meeting with Ofgem in 2 weeks, and I could ask this. And do not think this solves the macro problem, which is coordination across the complex regulatory framework that exists. But I think it is a little thing that we can do to try and reduce that burden. I haven't really perfectly solved this, but hopefully that, like, you're happy to come back and have a, like, is that what you were is that an acceptable
we just
answer?
wondered, because we spoke to Louise and some of the people off Ofgem last week, and we just sort of said, you know, that REC's already asking for a load of data. Why didn't you speak to them about, is it the same sort of data that you're looking for, or is there a way that they do it which might make it easier for you, sort of thing, as the regulator? Because obviously we know from the parser sort of piece that you try and cut down on the amount of data requested because you can get it from central systems, although when it was originally set up. So it's kind of like, is that something that Ofgem have considered doing, so we don't have to keep sending them data that they could get centrally? So it was just that I think they were going to have a conversation with a number of different parties about, is there a better way of them to get the data that they're requesting to cut down on the burden to suppliers?
Well, like, it's definitely a relevant question, right? If you could send into the performance assurance mailbox enough specifics that we can follow up on these specific requests that Ofgem were making. In the past, some of our park has just copied an Ofgem requirement that already exists, because it's so much harder to design a new report, get all the right things, do all the IT work, than it is to send it to a second recipient. But even then, that is extra work, right? We are conscious in the work that we do. It's easier for me to make commitments to line up to Ofgem than to make commitments for Ofgem on this call, but I will definitely take that up, and that is something that we think about literally all of the time. But if I have the specifics, then we can try and help and unblock that.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, it was a bit waffly, but I don't have a silver bullet, but I will work on it and I will help.
Thank you for the question, Jennifer, and thank you for the answer, Anton. Are there any final questions before we say goodbye? Great. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar, and we hope you found it useful.